Welcome. I'm Ted Sheriff, Park Manager of Quail Hollow State Park. Quail Hollow State Park, in conjunction with the Quail Hollow Volunteer Association, recognizing a need for greater public awareness of the declining condition of our natural environment, hosted a roundtable discussion on environmental values. Experts in many areas of environmental study were invited to the park to offer presentations covering a wide range of interests pertaining to various topics of our natural world and our human role in it. The following program is one in a series to emerge from that discussion. Hello and welcome to our roundtable discussion of environmental values. Welcome to Quail Hollow State Park. And I truly want to welcome you to Quail Hollow State Park. It's a pleasure to do so. And Quail Hollow State Park, briefly, is a little different type park for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and we're real pleased that it is. It fills a special niche in the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and has a very particular focus. And some of you may know the park well. Some of you may have noticed on your visit here today, on your entrance, that you didn't see the typical lake and campground and so on. And that's part of that special niche and special theme of this state park. It is devoted to the educational study and appreciation of our outdoor world. And as a part of our pursuit of that theme, we are real pleased to have you here today with us for a roundtable discussion on environmental values, which would be sociologically oriented, should be applicable, should have something for every one of you, if not many things, to think about and take home and perhaps live out, we hope, in the future. There's a number of deserving thank yous which I wish to extend before we open the actual discussion portion. And I want to first of all thank the other half of the steering committee, perhaps first and foremost, for a great deal of devotion and hard work in presenting this and bringing it together. And you'll be seeing her throughout the day, and that's Park Naturalist Barbara Fiolka. Would you?
Welcome once again to Quail Hollow. Very different than the vast stretch of swamp and woodland forests encountered by the first settlers as they moved in from Pennsylvania, and different still from the years when the Stewart family called this home and 55 great elms lined the driveway coming in. Today we find Quail Hollow filled with 700 acres of remarkably diverse habitat, and offers the visitor just a glimpse of the natural diversity this pocket of Ohio once held. From the mink crossing the road at dawn to the eerie sounds of the immature screech at night. Outside the boundaries of Quail Hollow and other places like it, we all know we find something different. And just recently, we've begun to recognize the value of our natural resources and the diversity and multitude of life they support. I welcome you once again to a roundtable discussion on environmental values, and we'll introduce the first panelist, Dr. Ruth Jacot. Currently the director of the Center for Environmental Education at Murray State University in Kentucky. From 1986 to 1989, she was director of the Chippewa Nature Center in Midland, Michigan. For the previous 16 years, she worked as naturalist and manager of naturalist programs for the Metro Park District in Toledo, Ohio. She's responsible for environmental education pre-service training at Murray State, and she has a leadership position with Russian Environmental Education Exchanges. Welcome, Dr. Jacot.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to first come back to Ohio and see some old friends and to make some new friends, to participate in this kind of a round table. I want to congratulate you for taking the chance of discussing important ideas in this kind of a setting. Really appreciate being a part of this astute group of people. Thank you. In thinking about naturalist values, I could not help but think back with a real debt of gratitude to my mentor in Toledo, Paul Goff, who believed in on-the-job training. So he took me in and let me be a naturalist before I really was one. And he gave me a lot of guidance, and I have to, again, thank him for those opportunities. Beginning then, and up till recently, I've had a question about where the general public sees themselves in relation to nature. Who are we? Are we a part of it or not? And so I've done a little bit of research, and I'd like to include you in my research. And so if you'll bear with me, I know it's a big question to ask of you right after lunch, but I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Now, don't go to sleep. And either from your imagination or from your memory, bring up a picture that comes to your mind when I say the environment. I trust that you've had a good look at that picture, and you can open your eyes now. And I'd like to know what kinds of pictures we brought up. How many people had trees in their environment picture? Okay. A goodly percentage had trees in their environment. How many had water that was moving in their environment? Not quite so many. All right. Did anybody have a picture of a broad expanse of water? Okay, some folks might have had oceans or huge lakes, big seas. How many people had animals, wild animals, in their picture? Oh, good. Look around and see how many of your fellows had animals in their picture. And how many people had people in their picture? Oh, not so many. And that follows very closely with almost every other group I ask this question of. 10% or less. The percentage was higher here, I can tell, because you folks have done a lot of thinking about this question. But generally, in just public groups, 10% or less of the people have a person in their picture of the environment. And if it's a class, I can pursue that and say, why didn't you have somebody in your picture? And the answer is generally, I wanted to bring up a pretty picture, and people would screw it up. That suggested to me that many of those people might have thought that we didn't belong here, that this was not really our place. And one of the things that I learned from Paul Goff was to remind young people when they came to the park that that was their place. And we used to play a little game with the Jack in the Pulpit and ask students what they thought Jack in the Pulpit was preaching to them. What was he saying? There's Jack standing up in his pulpit. What's he saying? And we'd come up with some different ideas. But I wanted them to remember that I thought Jack was saying, welcome home. This is your place. You belong here. And that has reflected a set of naturalist or environmental values on my part. Well, I'd like to take a quick historical trip back through what a lot of naturalist values began with. And if you can imagine a world without interpretive naturalists hired by the state or your regional park district, when naturalist values were often expressed by authors. Well, I'm really fortunate enough to have a whole set of John Burroughs writings. And I love the pictures, the places that he takes me in his writings. But I recognize that he was a product of his time. His values were a product of his time because his pictures are often full of prejudice for other races and definitely of bias toward women. Nature hasn't changed significantly since John Burroughs' time, but you don't find many nature articles or naturalists expressing some of his, what we might call now, narrow-minded views. Well, what is the role of the interpretive naturalist? Now, I like to think that it is, again, to reflect our times and our culture, to help people become a part of and not apart from their natural surroundings, to involve them in that nature, but not necessarily to impose their own personal values. I think the area in which we most are likely to get into controversy and conflict in that regard is who are we in relation to nature as far in religious terms. And it's my personal opinion that if I'm working for the state or any other governmental agency, it's not either my right or responsibility to share my personal religious views about nature. But I'm sure we're going to be talking a great deal more about that later on in today's session. So I think one of the most important things that naturalists must do is to provide opportunities for valid experiences. And by valid, I mean something that can last, be real, and have authenticity to it. Many people come to naturalists with just an experience of nature on the Discovery Channel or Disney or something that is compressed in time. And they might, because of those experiences, not understand that the predator-prey relationship isn't necessarily as it's seen on the screen, that predators often look clumsy, and they don't make a hit every time, and that the photographers who took those pictures had to spend months in order to give you a few seconds of that excitement. I think of things like a day at Teton Marsh. One day at Teton Marsh, if you remember seeing that film, you remember that everything is represented in that day at Teton Marsh. We should be so fortunate in one day to see all those things. And yet that isn't a fortunate occurrence because we haven't had to invest ourselves in it. We haven't had to take the time that's required to put ourselves in that setting. And so that's part of a valid experience, and that means that we have to take the time that it requires. I think if more people who are involved in environmental efforts had a look at reality and spent more time in a natural setting, our politics of environment might have a little bit more understanding to it. We might hope for people who love nature to be realistic in the way that they're protecting it. And again, I feel like I'm bleeding over into other topics, but I feel it's important in any traditional naturalist values or a traditional naturalist role to help people understand concepts that go beyond marketing. It's no surprise that a spotted owl was part of the habitat efforts and preservation in the Northwest. Spotted owl looks at you with two eyes and is really pretty interesting looking, and people like owls. And it's also that I don't believe that we've been able to market the concept of habitat. It has taken something that people could hang their interest in and their kind of a Bambi-like love of nature onto a spotted owl instead of being able to show concern for the whole habitat. So I'm watching carefully now to see where we're going, since Secretary Babbitt is saying that we're going to take more of a habitat approach to endangered species. And certainly we're going to touch on that too, aren't we? So if we could trust and believe in people's experience in the outdoors, it might be that we wouldn't have to use marketing of a single animal, but we could be more realistic and ask for people's concern for a whole habitat, for an ecosystem, and one which they could then be part of. The research that I'm also interested in, that's been done by a number of people, specifically Tom Tanner, to give us an idea of what makes an environmentalist, what salient or important childhood experiences might there be that have caused people to really, really care, to care enough to make it their life work, or at least their passion. Two particular things that interest me in Tom Tanner's research into what makes an environmentalist. The first one is that there has to be frequent exposure between young people and a natural setting. And that frequent exposure should happen either alone or with a very few significant other people. Who might those significant other people be? It could be a teacher, it could be you, it could be a naturalist, it might be a parent or Uncle Ned, someone who was willing to take the time with them in the outdoors and who could trust that experience of children and nature. That if you put them together and get out of the way, good things can happen. Another area that Dr. Tanner found was significant for people who were really in love with nature was that they had lost a special place. They had cared for a natural area in some special way and then had lost it. And I can support that with one poignant experience outside Toledo while we were working there. There was going to be a new development out to the west, and it was a wonderful woods of wildflowers. So we thought we would go out and rescue a few before the houses got built. And as we were walking through the woods, we came upon the broad swath of a road that had been cut through. And in the soft sand, we saw some pony tracks, and then written with a stick beside it, I could hear a child's cry, "You can't do this to my woods." Well, I've never forgotten that. Obviously, it still chokes me up. And I like to think that maybe there was something else sacrificed there besides the wildflowers, and that was some of the love that that young person had for that place, and maybe it caused them to develop the strength of values which made them care enough to really try to do something about it. Because what is the point of developing a set of naturalist values, caring for the environment, if it doesn't go anyplace? And the place I feel it needs to go is in helping young people, helping the next generation develop a caring for the land which can't speak for itself, and for plants and animals that need our care and protection. And if we can do that with our own love for nature and the out of doors, then our time, I think, has been worthwhile. I hope that after some experiences in the out of doors with somebody else to care, that we might develop a generation of people who recognize that nature is a place for them, that they do belong there, and that being a part of it doesn't necessarily screw it up. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. We hope you'll join us again when we present the next segment of a roundtable discussion on environmental values.